Thank you, Bridget. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Welcome to this session on performance management from two perspectives. As Bridget mentioned, my name is Jeff Press. I'm the Director of Government Performance at Socrata. I'm joined by just two amazing innovators on the stage here today in the public sector space, Debbie Volk and David Alba. I'll first introduce Debbie. Debbie is the St. Pete Stat Coordinator for the city of St. Petersburg, Florida, which is a city of roughly 260,000 people. She joined the office of the mayor last year and is responsible for overseeing all of St. Pete Stat. How many folks run stat programs in the audience? A couple people? Okay. And so that is the performance management program for the city, the official performance management program for the city. And in her role, she's truly focused on increasing the access, the availability of data in order for it to be better shared and ultimately better used. So thank you, Debbie, for being here with us today. And I'm also joined by David Alba, who made the trip over from Brussels. So thank you, David. You might win the award for coming the farthest to Socrata Connect, which we appreciate. David is the evaluation officer for the European Commission. Previously served as an auditor for the Commission with KPMG in Belgium and Hungary, and is really a leading thinker on performance management and data in the public sector. So thank you, David, for joining. I think one thing that might be abundantly clear after introducing these two awesome individuals is that their organizations that they work for are really nothing like each other at all, right? And that was kind of the point today. The city of St. Petersburg, Florida, roughly 260,000 residents. Debbie, how many employees roughly in this city?
About 2,500.
2,500 employees in the city, compared with the European Commission, which I believe is about 32,000 staff, with 27 member countries, hundreds of billions of dollars in investment to their member states. So on the surface, you would think these organizations are a world apart, right? Not only geographically, but perhaps in the way that they're structured, and some of the challenges that they face. And that's the latter that I want to focus on today, and really the hypothesis that I want to test, right? That you can take two different government organizations on different continents focused on completely different missions at completely different scales, and yet there's probably more similarities at their core than differences. And so we'll see how we end up at the end of this. We talked a little bit beforehand, but I still believe that there are more similarities than differences at their core. The topic came to me after getting to know Debbie and David and hearing them talk about things like their desire to be more consultative in the way that they approach performance management, their desire to link budget decisions to performance outcomes, their focus on making performance data actionable and usable by all staff, their desire to build capability and capacity among their teams, and finally to be very transparent about it. So with that said, I want to kick it over to Debbie and David to each talk for about 3 to 4 minutes to introduce you to their organizations, their priorities, some of the challenges that they're facing. We only have 30 minutes today, so we're going to keep it pretty condensed, and I hope you'll be able to save a couple minutes for your Q&A at the end. We'll start with David. And David, if you could just talk a little bit about the European Commission, give folks a general background, and then maybe highlight 1 or 2 of the priorities that you guys have right now, that would be great. Then we'll go to Debbie.
All right, thank you. So the European Commission is the executive body of the European Union. So we are like something like the federal government you have here. I'm working for the regional funds. We spend 700 billion euros in 28 countries, and we have 500 operational programs where we spend this money. And here comes the challenge, and here comes a link from us with Socrata. So we try to find a way to visualize and to contextualize this spending. We could not wait until the end of the programs, 7 years, and to see what happens. Simply there was a need to do something about it and to talk about our performance. And this is happening now. 2 years ago we started this project with Socrata, the open data platform, and that's what we do. We kind of show to the citizens and to the public what is what we are doing, and where do we actually spend the money.
So St. Petersburg is a mid-sized city, as Jeff said, about 260,000 people. And the current mayor was brought on and kind of campaigned on the platform of St. Pete Stat. It took him a little while to bring me on board, so I've been on board about a year. And the biggest thing is they want to have accountability, like most of the performance programs for the city. And so the biggest thing that I found with that is, being in the mayor's office brings sort of a weight and gravity to the whole situation, which is helpful, but that at the same time, departments feel it as a mandate. which is a lot different feeling. And so I was challenged with trying to find value in the departments and being able to adopt the St. Pete Stat program and not become like associated with the administration, but having it integrated within the culture. So working on trying to get them to use their data to get a single source of truth, which is a little challenging. A lot of people keep information in a lot of different places. So just working towards that in the last a little over a year.
So you both undersell yourself incredibly. So we're gonna pull this out of you. So I talked to you both about the challenge of making performance management not just another side project in an organization, right? Really driving it into the culture of the organization, primarily as a problem-solving tactic, right? Not just an accountability tactic, not a whack-a-mole tactic, right? But really equipping our employees with the ability to do more and to be more innovative. And so how are you thinking about that in your organizations and moving from, I think, a role of historically for all of us in the performance world kind of being data cops to really being data advisors within our organization? So we'll flip it. Well, Debbie, we'll start with you and then come back to David.
So I'd known prior that there was a performance management system in place, and it was mandated through the mayor's office, and it was determined by the mayor's office which information went out and how it was done. And so it wasn't very useful to the departments, it was useful to the administration. And then also it was a very manual process. Everybody emailed up here, they did Excel sheets there, and so it was all very manual. And and then as soon as the mayor went away, so did the performance management process, right? So when I came in, I knew that the frontline staff needed to find value in the data that they use. And one thing I always say is we are not short on data. What we're short on is the ability to make decisions off of it. It's here, it's there, it's everywhere. It wasn't in a succinct location, it wasn't collected the same way, and it wasn't in a way that they can pull it out. So there was a real challenge in a lot of the systems to get the information back out. And so I found that if I could make value to those departments and saying, look, I'm going to help you get this information back out so that you can make decisions. And then these decisions that you're making and the things that you're watching that are important to the work that you do every day is also going to be important to the administration. Maybe not at that granular level, but we will roll it up so that they can sort of consume it in a level that's important to them. So changing that kind of culture and thought, because the departments ask me as I'm working with them, they're like, well, what's the difference now? There's going to be a new mayor and a new, initiative. I'm like, you have to be accountable to yourselves and to each other within your department here. So it doesn't matter which the administration is. We need to switch that thought and using that data to be accountable to each other. So not just, sort of like an exercise in futility, but actually using that information to make informed decisions. So it's been a very long, arduous process of trying to get that data in a format that they can consume. And then they're also realizing, my favorite is, they see the data now in a visualization way, and they're like, well, what's wrong with the data? And I'm like, did you do anything to it? Did you change? I'm like, the data says what it says, so I guess we need to look at what's going on here. Is it a data entry issue, or is this really what's going on? So it's allowed them to look at things in a new way and be able to make those informed decisions, and now they want more. Oh, can we have this? Oh, can we have that? I'm like, yeah, that's great, let's do that. So they're now getting excited because they can get that information in ways that they can utilize it. So, but the key was to get them to find value at that lower level, and then it just easily rolls up into higher administrations.
Debbie, you mentioned something there that I just want to comment on. We're using data to be accountable to each other, right? Which is not something that we hear all the time, right? For folks who are in the workshop that I did yesterday, I think I talked a little bit about, oftentimes in government, we put vertical accountability mechanisms on top of horizontal problems. How many problems in our organizations can we solve within our silos? Like virtually none, right? That's how we try to manage our organizations day in, day out, and it's just what we've been dealing with for many, many years. When you actually look at the data and hold people accountable for collaboration and problem solving, making them come together and understanding the depth of the problem at that level, I think you just come out on the side with not only much more engaged employees, but better solutions. So I just love that. I love that approach. David?
If I really want to be honest with ourselves, so I have to say I'm not sure we are doing performance management. So we are doing performance monitoring maybe, and I think that would be a much more honest way to express the situation. But the push is very big, And there is a political context. So because of the financial crisis and because of the Commission pushing for scrutiny and budget cuts on the level of the member states, of course, we also had to do something about it. So we have to justify expenditure. We just can't just say we spent so much money and that's it. We have to say why and how this works. And also there is a policy context. There are many policies in the European Union. So in the budget discussion, it's very important to justify why one policy gets more money and the other less money. So this is something which is, and this whole situation makes the discussions different. So if you see how the budget discussions have changed, even on the level of the commissioners or at the level of the European Parliament or the European Council, you see that it moved much more to concrete data-based information discussions rather than an emotional-based discussions. And one of the reasons is that this data is available and it's more consistently reported. That's why this is very important. But there's also an internal aspect of it. So because of this push, the legislation has changed. So the legislations in itself have a performance framework defined in it, which simply forces us to do something about performance, to monitor performance, and to act on underperformance. And this is something which is not an internal decision. This is a legal requirement, and we had to find a system, and we had to find processes, and we are doing that, which satisfy both this political and legal requirement. And in addition to that, there is the third aspect. It's the outside world, the citizens, the journalists, and the technological context. We have an enormous number of questions from journalists, citizens, and researchers on what and how we spend the money. You have to understand that our fund, the strategic funds, in some countries they represent 60% of all expenditure, all public expenditure. So this is really huge. So it's a day-to-day topic which comes up in journals and magazines and discussions and on the political level. So obviously you need to feed that. And what we saw that by the fact that we have this data repository and the open data platform, the number of requests, they just went down because a lot of information is available and is much more consistently available. That is shown by we had 3 million hits on the site in the last 2 years, so I think it's pretty a lot. And there's also a technological context where I think because of the technological development, because we got used to the iPhones and the smart technology, we don't want to wait anymore. So we want to have things immediately. If we have a question, we just Google it. Sure. We don't want to write an email to the Commission and wait 2 weeks until they answer. And this is also something which we had to address. And this is what we did.
So you mentioned a mandate, David, within the Commission. Debbie, is there a mandate within the city of St. Petersburg for performance management or data use?
No, there's not.
Something coming down from the mayor?
Right, that's the only thing, right. So
Okay.
it's not, I mean, there's a policy in place, it needs to be updated, but it's more, we have a lot of we have laws from the state of Florida about transparency and accountability and making sure the information is accessible in a certain time frame. And so having it on a centralized location, easily accessible, would help, fulfill those mandates. And they're becoming more and more, like this, like David said, the requirements of what people are able to access and get within a certain time frame is getting, more. There are more requests and more mandates coming down just from the state level. So from the state level, we have a lot of requirements.
I think there's pros and cons to mandating the use of performance data and management, right? I think as we've all experienced, sometimes it can lead to some compliance-focused activity. Other times it provides the backbone that you need to get people to actually care and start to focus on it. And I was certainly part of an organization where it was mandated, so I kind of see both sides as interesting. I want to ask a question around tying performance outcomes and data to investments. Certainly something that I know you've been working on, David. I think in your situation, you're a little bit removed, right? As we've talked about, from where the outcomes are occurring. I think Debbie's a little closer to where some of those citizen outcomes might not feel like play every day.
Yeah, every day is a little simple.
A little bit, yeah. But yet you're still both focused on it and trying to make progress. And I don't really think there's any government that's completely cracked the nut on what we like to call performance-based budgeting, right? I think we all struggle with it a bit. So if you could talk just a bit about your plans for that, what you're thinking about there, and then you, Debbie, as well, that'd be great.
I mean, we do this for quite a long time, so it's not now we started with performance measures. It's already 20 years. Some type of performance element is built in to the fund management. But what we see, the problem is if you don't buy in the other side, the measured side, then there's huge bias there. There's huge moral hazard because then indicators will not measure anymore, they will become the goals. And that's a problem. That's a problem which we should find a way to overcome, that everybody should be interested in the actual performance. And to some extent, we have to accept that's a little bit the problem of our current performance management system, that we penalize and we give bonuses based on indicator achievement values. But because of that, it might have a diverse effect on the decision making. I say an example: if you say that you disperse money based on how many kilometer roads are built, and the goal is 10 kilometers, there might be a problem with the quality of roads built because everybody will rush to whatever 10 kilometers is there to build, but they do not care about what is the quality there. So as long as indicators are only indicating, are only a proxy of performance, they are very good. But once they become actual goals and an organization is only working on satisfying an indicator system, that's wrong. And I think this is something which we are trying to work on the policy side, to find a way to work around this bias. But on the other hand, what we see that the mere fact about talking about performance and having indicators drives the discussions to the right direction. And what we understand from the technical level in our member states, that even the ministries, they appreciate the fact that there's something concrete to talk about. It's much easier, it's a good starting point to make decisions. That it's not something totally open, there is a certain framework where you have to discuss, and then you can, even if it's just a proxy of performance, these indicators which you define, then at least you understand what are the input-output ratios and what kind of measures, how they deliver and what.
So currently, our budgeting process does have a performance piece in it, and it's done in a separate system. So as I went to the city and took inventory about where all this performance stuff is, this was in a tool that they put their budget data, and then they're supposed to do certain performance things, which included a lot of widget counting. How many people were served, how many pipe were put into the ground, how many people went to the golf course or into the library. And so not a very substantial, way of looking at how do you know you need dollars, right? So I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, great. So does this mean they need more money, less money, the same money? And so we tried to build St. Pete Stat. Unfortunately, it got started at the same time budgeting did. So this year it wasn't really valuable. I think it was just a parallel process. Next year I hope to see it more integrated in terms of the St. Pete Stat data is conversational, not like David said, punitive, or you need to make these goals, but more of what's going on. Why are you making the goals? Why are you exceeding the goals just as much as why aren't you? And then from there, make the budgeting decisions so that you can, that the money is funneled into the right places for the right reasons. So you don't want to penalize somebody that well exceeded their goal because the reason why they exceeded it was a phenomenon that's never going to happen again. So you don't want to cut back their budget just because something happened that nobody anticipated, for whatever it was. And then also you may or may not want to fund something that's struggling because, maybe it's struggling because nobody's been doing what they're supposed to be doing, or there's something out of their control and even more money is really not going to fix it. So it's understanding and having those questions why, and I see that happening in the meetings, that they're asking that questions, what's going on here, can you explain this, just tell me what's going on, and not necessarily like you're in big trouble. They're going from the aspect of how can we remove these obstacles, or what can we do differently to maybe help you in that way. So it becomes that conversation. So that's what we hope to see intertwined with the budget. Then it's something that's done all along the year. So when budgeting cycle comes and a department asks for dollars, it's already, we all know why they're asking for those dollars or not asking for those dollars. It's been discussed all year round. So we already know where our key areas are that we need to address, and budgeting hopefully will go a little smoother than it currently does.
No, I love that. I mean, it shouldn't be a once-a-year exercise, right? And I think something that you both kind of hit on is that, especially with the pay for performance comment, we could have a whole other session on that. I probably won't want to dig into that too much today, but I think the principle is the same. When you start to attach targets to something and you only focus on the target and only focus on the goalpost, game on, right? People know how to play it, they will. And so thinking about taking the emphasis off of the target and more onto the trend and the strategy and the plan, right? And where we've been and where we want to go is going to help drive the behavior that I think we all want to see, right? Not easy to do, but I think really important to do. I love asking questions about lessons learned, because I think it's really important, given both of your experiences, to kind of take a look back and see where you've been, and if you put yourself in your shoes maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, maybe what are the one or two things that you might have done differently given what you know now, right? About where you are in your role and the progress you've made. And so Debbie, I'll start with you. If there's any wisdom that you can impart on folks, putting yourself in your shoes a couple of years ago, and kind of the progress that you've made, what would you say?
So two things. One is a lesson learned and something I found was incredibly valuable to me. So one is never assume. Never assume that people are the same place you are. Never assume that they're going to move forward on the same thing. Is you have to, I'm a salesman. I go to departments and I'm selling this. I'm like, this is awesome, it's going to be so awesome for you. You're going to love this, and then your data is going to be there, and we're going to help you. I'm going to help you. That's a big thing. Because when I come in, they always think it's another thing I have to do. So if I can help spin that and say, look, actually I'm going to help you relieve some of your reporting, making it so that you don't have to worry about the data, your visualization's up to date, you don't have to keep recreating that in Excel 6 times over, and guess what, the link broke. And so you don't know what the problem is, and you have to keep building and building. So I'm hoping to save you time. Those public records requests, we can all do that through here. So trying to sell it through that way. And don't assume that they want to be part of that until you kind of build that. And that's the other thing, is that the thing I learned is having that connection with the departments is that true value, the true interest in what they're doing. So through the process of defining the performance measures is truly understanding what it is they're trying to accomplish and getting those right performance measures so they feel like it tells their story, right? Because before they were mandated to measure certain things and just hand it out, and that's what they did. They just did an exercise. And so doing it the other way allows for buy-in and then data quality and then utilization. So what good is something you build unless someone utilizes it? So that's the other thing, is trying to get them to utilize.
I kind of agree with you. So the thing is that helped, or that's something which I also learned, that just simply getting out of the ivory tower and not forcing the rules on people and forcing reporting on people and trying to go to them, try to sell them the product and to make little modifications so they also feel they can influence the process, makes a huge difference. And this is something which we also did. So we saw it's not working, so we got out of our ivory towers and we went down at the level of the users and we did it, and it really worked. And this change which happened at the level of the interaction with the user was amazing. When you get closer to them, suddenly they are really interested and they want to do it themselves and they come up with their own ideas. So that's definitely something which is for me is a very positive experience. The other positive experience, which was not an outcome which we expected, we have a problem with the quality of data.
You're the only one in the room.
And for some reason, publishing the data helped, because immediately it was very visible if somebody was an outlier. So it was very visible if something was wrong. And simply this forced the data suppliers to take more care, because simply they will face all the time questions from the journalists, simply because like a Spanish journalist looked at our platform and just saw different data, but was reported by the national authorities. And after a while, they understood, okay, it's better to report correctly, because then we will have these questions coming back all the time. And this I think it's a huge benefit which we did not count at the beginning.
So I don't know what you all think, but I think the hypothesis that I made in the beginning is somewhat validated. I think even self-admittedly by David and Debbie. I think there are certainly a lot of similarities between the two organizations. Obviously, worlds apart still in structure and magnitude and those types of things, but I think in this world of performance management and data use and quality and everything we've talked about, there's so much that we're struggling with together. And so much we can still learn from each other no matter what organizations we work in. I do want to save a couple minutes for questions, so I'm going to kick it out to the audience now. Yes, ma'am.
So what do you do when the story that the departments want to tell with their data doesn't quite align to the challenge statements that council has decided that we need to address? They want to tell a different story.
Then, you mean not their actual story or not the story that's being asked for?
I would say, like, when they want to focus on, when the story they want to tell is about widgets, so that they can get more knowledge. So how do you change that culture shift of telling a different story that is actually citizen, community focused?
That's a hard one. So I would say the big, like I said, that initial like getting to know them and understanding what they're, what it is that they're trying to watch for their outcomes, and that it's more than just widgets, because they do. I mean, it's amazing. It's like they're doing so much watching. Like I worked with stormwater department first. They're doing so much watching up here and not really realizing, like rainfall, for instance. That's incredibly important to the city of St. Petersburg and the stormwater system, right? How much rain is happening. But I don't think that would have been part of their story had I said, well, what is it that you're watching? So getting them to open up their mind is making sure that their story is reflective of the work they're doing, which means, are you with a city, state, county?
I'm with the city.
Okay, so yes. So yeah, that the work that they're doing, everything that they do is to other departments and also to the citizens and the council. So it's getting them to understand that you just can't look here. It's not reflective of all the work that you're doing. So it's tricky. You got to tell them how really helpful this will be if you actually do it this way.
I think we have time for one more question. Anyone has one? Any other questions? We answered them all. Yes, sir.
You said something about I don't know if I'll need this or not, but you said something about putting the data out there and letting the data tell the story and looking and finding outliers by just basically publishing the data. Can you cite a specific example on that as to how that actually worked to your advantage in your government?
Simply, tell an easy example. You have targets in the system. And when you go to the system, you see that the first year of implementation of the 7 years, somebody already delivered 1,000% of the target. Okay, so obviously this is the place where the organization will come back and say, can we change the targets? Because it doesn't look good, and we are the race to the bottom, and target setting was maybe too hard. And there are also other sides. So whenever, simply by visualizing the data, you see if it feels natural or not. And the other example was, yes, with the journalists. So I think what is happening, and it really depends on the policy area which you work in. If the policy area is scrutinized, and because we spend so much money, we are scrutinized on several levels. We're scrutinized by the Court of Auditors. We have and other institutions. We are scrutinized by the local court. We are scrutinized at a political level. We are scrutinized by the journalists. So if something is strange or wrong, it is very fast visible, because the Prime Minister yesterday told that in the Czech Republic they spent 50% of the money. That was a statement. And then the journalist goes to our site and sees that it's only 20%. Then obviously he will say, okay, well, what is happening here? I mean, that's not what the Prime Minister said. And these are something, because of our visibility, this works. But I'm pretty sure this works at every level. Just the political pressure will be different, that's it.
And I'd say because a lot of the departments are first in getting to look at their data in this way, we have like an internal view. So they have the opportunity to look at, and now they see value in aligning the system that they're entering data in and to enter it correctly because they're looking at it. So not everything goes public right away. So they have that opportunity first to vet it out and take a look at it and start correcting. So it's definitely in that visualization. It hits them like a brick wall. I'm telling you, it's like data doesn't lie.
I wish we had more time. I wish we could literally just sit up here all day and just talk about this. Unfortunately, we can't. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you all so much. Let's give a round of applause.